Tickets went on sale for the Borders Railway in mid-June, but instead of advertising the real price, a glitch in the system saw them being advertised at 3 times the actual cost. Having had months to prepare for launch day, ScotRail and Trainline scored a huge own goal by simply not getting their act together. And it was several days before things were rectified. It was a huge promotional opportunity missed, and the powers that be came in for a lot of flack, and rightly so. Leader of the Scottish Borders Council, David Parker.
Yes, I think it's fair to say that it could have gone better from ScotRail's point of view. Not good that we've had these hiccups, and certainly on the first day that tickets go on sale, I can totally understand the Borders public's frustrations. What I can say is that this morning we contacted ScotRail, we're asking them to get it changed as quickly as possible, make sure the correct information is out there, and hopefully that will be done in the very imminent future. I always think you should never launch these things on a Sunday in terms of when you're dealing with technology, and that certainly hasn't been helpful. But I mean, I agree. I mean, it's very frustrating that we've had this on this first day, and you can understand, the public's view. So we absolutely need to make sure that ScotRail get this fixed and get it fixed soon.
When the correct prices were released, everyone was in for a pleasant surprise. A one-way journey along the full length of the route from Edinburgh Waverley to Tweedbank would cost just £10. An off-peak day return would be £11.20. And if you used your rail card and booked online, you could get a return ticket for just £7.40. You certainly couldn't argue with that. However, the inevitable rush for tickets to be on the first train has the potential to leave some people disappointed. While many booked their tickets for the first ever passenger train leaving on Sunday the 6th of September at 8:45 a.m, when their tickets arrived, they didn't guarantee them a seat on that particular train. Instead, it was a ticket which guaranteed them a seat on a train for that day, but not necessarily the one they wanted. Understandably, people want to be part of history. Telling their grandchildren they were on the second or third train out of Tweedbank on the first day isn't quite the same as saying to them they were on the first. Another concern, of course, is for passengers who've booked from Galashiels or Stow. Are they actually going to get on the train at all if it's jam-packed? Abellio Managing Director Dominic Booth.
Yeah, we will obviously have to manage the loading on the day itself and control to make sure that we're not, we can have plenty of people on the train, but what we won't do is allow that to become in any way uncomfortable or unsafe. So we'll have to manage that on the morning itself. But there's plenty of trains through the day, so people will have the chance to ride on that first day, if not exactly on the first train.
Sundays, of course, it's hourly. Is there an opportunity that you could actually go half-hourly on the first day?
We haven't planned for that at the moment, but I mean, I must admit, you mentioned it, so I'm quite happy to, I'll take that back to Phil Verster and the team and just see if we think that might be necessary. But the facility to step up the service as we bring the Borders online and on stream will always be something we'll look at. But it's not a bad idea. We'll maybe have a look into that.
While the ticket fiasco was playing out, driver training started, and we were there when the first Class 158 train went through the Beauchamp Tunnel. Enjoy these images, along with a last glimpse of the long yellow test train on the Borders Railway. At the end of our last series, we saw long-time campaigner Madge Elliott having a locomotive named after her at a ceremony at Edinburgh Waverley. And she was promised a trip on one of the trains before the line was open. And one hot summer Sunday morning in July, she finally boarded that train, covering part of the Waverley route for the first time in nearly 50 years. Trains have become very familiar on the line already, with plenty of trains zipping down as the drivers get used to the route. And courtesy of ScotRail, here's a view through Gala Shields on the final part of the journey to Tweedbank.
On the 6th of September, 1 month from today, after an absence of 46 years, passenger rail services will once again commence in the Scottish borders. That campaign, which has been led by communities, by various MPs and MSPs, by the whole public sector in the borders, has been a tremendous one. It's returned not only the most significant railway built in our country in 100 years, but a railway many people never believed would ever happen. Why would a small area of Scotland be able to attract a railway and a £350 million spent on it? It was able to do so because the community came together, they worked very hard, they dismissed the doubters, and they made it happen. And all of you have played your part in ensuring that it's delivered. We've achieved something significant, we've achieved it together, and we've achieved it by working hard as a team. Thank you very much to you all, and I hope you enjoy the rest of today's proceedings. Thank you. If I'm honest, it's one of these buildings that I had lost a few nights sleep about. I was quite concerned about how it would look, how it would fit into its landscape. And if I'm being totally honest, it's actually tremendous. I'm really impressed with the look of the building and the final results. And I do think that once we've got all the landscaping finished and the old bus station knocked down, people will really come to appreciate what we've been able to provide here, because it really is a first-class facility, a very high-quality building with very high-quality finishes.
Over 40 years the old building has been there and it's served its purpose, but it's chalk and cheese.
It's chalk and cheese. I mean, anyone who is a regular user of the old bus station and when they come and use the new interchange, they will be amazed. It has very good quality toilets, it has shower facilities, it's got lockers for people, it's got a cafe, it's got a whole raft of electronic tourist information and travel information, and it's just so different from what is there at the moment. I think people will be really impressed.
Really, it's like very many departure lounges at airports. If you've got the bus stations in the big city, you've got seating at each individual stands, which are clearly marked, so it helps people. It's inside, it's clean, it's comfortable, and basically we've got 6 doors, 7 stances. There'll be clear marking at each stand, so we're going to have a screen above each stand, so we'll have active information, kind of more real-time information of bus arrivals. The whole building itself is fitted future-proof for real-time information coming for the wider bus network. So really the departure lounge style. We're supplemented, we've also got the same screen as they've got on the railway platform in the building. So on a wet, horrible, miserable winter's day, if you're waiting for a train, you can actually wait for it in this building. You can see the times in which your train's coming. You can have a cup of tea, look out the window when your train comes, and you can cross the road. So it's really trying to embed both modes of transport together, but trying to make it a really enhanced environment for sustainable transport. That's further helped, I suppose, with we're going to have 24-hour staff in the building, so if you've got queries, you need to speak to somebody about timetabling or how the the tourist information screen works, there's someone there to help as well. I think that the personal touch will make a big difference from what was there previously.
Heavy rail is not cheap to do, it's an expensive form of transport, but it's also growing in popularity. They've got 85 million journeys made across Scotland last year, so people want to use the rail link when it's there. We've done quite a lot in my view in terms of extending rail links, whether it's Stirling, Allow, Kincardine, Airdrie, Bathgate. And as I say, we're seeing people coming back to the railways. And as you said as well, in the borders itself, it puts you on a map you were not on before, which is the rail map of Scotland and indeed the UK. And I think that's very important for people looking to make a day trip somewhere, people thinking about where they might locate and then access jobs, perhaps even in Edinburgh. So this is a tremendous event, a tremendous project for the borders generally.
People were certainly mobile in the 60s, but people far more mobile now in terms of commuting. The number of people commuting 30, 35, 40 miles to work would be very small in comparison in the 60s to what it is today. So I suppose the expected passengers and the reasons for travelling will be somewhat different to days gone by.
Well, you're right, commuting. Many people will find it much more convenient to commute by train. Very reasonable price ticket prices rather, for the journey as well. So that'll make it attractive for people to commute. But in addition to that, people get the idea, I'll go down to the borders, have a look, I can get a train from most other parts of Scotland now and go down for a part of the country perhaps you haven't been down to see before. So it's going to be a benefit to indigenous businesses in the borders, and of course having attractions like the Great Tapestry of Scotland I think it's a tremendous thing. So there's a two-way benefit. But you're right about the commuting element, and also that gives people access to sometimes higher paid jobs here in Edinburgh and throughout the Central Belt. So a great step forward for the Borders.
If it was to reach the stage in terms of its popularity where you needed to look at expansion, would there be troublesome areas with bridges that would require a certain amount of work in order to allow for additional volume?
It's always the case if you try to expand the capacity of a railway. We're looking at it in different parts of the country just now, then it's going to cost money, there's no doubt about that. But what we've done with the Borders project is estimated as best we can what we think the likely patronage will be, what the usage will be, what the capacity is and what budget we have. You have to work within those constraints. But yes, of course, if you want to expand any rail line, then you're going to have to pay to do that. And sometimes, not talking about the Borders just now, but other ones you can see you've got to raise a bridge. Sometimes you have to do that for electrification purposes as well. So yes, you have to take those things into account if you want to expand the line.
I know there's a great deal of excitement and interest and intrigue in the Borders looking ahead to that first week in September. It's going to be a very busy time for people in the Borders, and interestingly, you know, for a lot of people this is the first time they've been to Waverley to see where trains will depart from.
I think you're right, that's a week-long celebration really for the opening. We're drawing up the plans for that just now, in fact we have been for some time. We want to make sure that everyone hears about this. Not least because many people have put a lot of effort into making sure this link comes, but also because we want to tell the world about it, so they themselves think about using this. There is a coterie of people that are very interested in railways just for their own sake who go to every new opening, and we want them to be there, but we want to have as many other people realising this is a new part of the country, perhaps they haven't thought about going to in the past, but they can now access not just by rail but by steam train on many occasions. So we want to make as much as we can of that week-long opening week, if you like, to make sure people are aware of what's on offer.
This was Stuart in his early days learning to drive a train. Back then he was understandably like a kid in a candy shop. Not every day you get to live your dream, and as the big launch day approaches, we met up again and I wanted to know, well, the obvious.
Such a beautiful line, I must say that. It's a real pleasure to be driving it. It's a great line, the views are fantastic. It's a real pleasure to be driving up and down this route now.
Do you actually have time to look at the views?
During our training, not so much. You're focused on all sort of curvatures of the line and the speeds and things like that. But when you do get the chance to have a look elsewhere, it's magnificent, it really is.
Is it anything like you imagined it to be?
I'd have to say no. It's far more superior than what I thought it would be. As you say, driving up and down the A7, you're getting stuck behind things. It's a twisty, windy road. This just takes all the pressure off getting the train and using the Borders line.
So what's been the best part of it so far? I mean, is it the thrill of going through the Beauchamp Tunnel or Fala Hill or over the Harding Green Bridge or the Lothian Bridge Viaduct? So many iconic features on the route.
I would have to say all of it. All of it's great. Climbing up over Fala is a really steep climb. But once you get over the other side, I mean, some of the views are just fantastic, as I said before. It's a real great line to drive, and I can only think that it would be great to be a passenger on this line as well.
And of course the big event, September the 6th is the first passenger service. Have you had the rota yet?
No. We'll wait and see what happens with that one. It might be a case that whoever's booked to drive that train, I'd like to be the first one to do it, to take the first passenger service, but it's not in my hands, unfortunately.
So we're at Tweedbank Station at the moment. You've just driven down from Edinburgh Waverley. You're going to be going back up there in a few minutes' time as well. What's your feeling?
It's just pride. It really is just pride to be driving this line. As I said, 40 years it's been closed for. To be one of the drivers selected to drive this route is just an absolute privilege.
And we mentioned about ambition as well in the earlier interview, and this is still, absolutely living the dream, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't be more happy and more proud to be a train driver on this line. It's just an absolute honour to be driving it, and I hope to be doing it for many years to come.
Now, of course, you only had a couple of days ahead of the drivers because you had to obviously learn the route yourselves as well. How difficult was that?
It was quite difficult, but I'd done a lot of preparation work before, looking at route maps and things like that, so I had an idea of all junction names, station names, where they were about on the route, so it wasn't too bad.
Any specific challenges for this route?
I don't think so. It's quite a nice route to drive. The speed changes quite a lot. Going up to Fala Hill, just before the top of it, you're 85, and then you're 65 from Fala Hill coming back down again.
Anybody not tempted yet to use the train to travel? Well, there's no better ambassador than Stuart Farrell.
It's going to be great. Once this line opens on the 6th of September and people are hopefully going to flock and use this line, it's a brilliant line. Get out there, use it. It's there to be used. Try and get the councillors behind them to try and get it to go further afield. I think that would be the overall aim, but if you don't use it, that's not going to happen.
Had a lot of positive feedback from members of the public who obviously appreciate all the time and efforts and expense that have actually gone into sort of creating this cutting edge facility. Everything's in place, a bit of final planning sort of going on, but we're sort of well on our sort of way with it. I think actually the sort of biggest test was actually buses, and that has, as I said, run surprisingly well, so I'm sure the sort of railway experience will actually be of a very similar level.
Well, you have 1,200 yards here, and there was a study done 4 or 5 years ago, I think, and I think today's prices we're talking about 2 million to reinstate it. Some people suggest the best idea is to take the top off, and then you've just got a cutting, and then you don't have all the business of looking after it and maintaining it and so on. But you know, we'll see what the powers that be say when the time comes.
The Borders Railway opens to passengers on September the 6th. It's the longest new domestic railway to be constructed in Britain for over 100 years. And the importance of this is reflected in the fact that Her Majesty the Queen will officially open the line on September the 9th, the day she becomes the longest-serving monarch in history. The stretch of track between Edinburgh Waverley and Tweed Bank covers about a third of the distance of the old Waverley line, which was axed by the Beeching Cuts in the late 1960s. Dr. Richard Beeching was chairman of British Railways and the man chosen to reshape Britain's railways and stop the huge financial losses and turn it back into a profit-making industry. One of the most controversial decisions he made was to get rid of the Waverley line. Author and railway expert David Spavin explains the history.
The Waverley route began life as a branch line from Edinburgh to Hawick in the mid-Victorian period, built by the North British Railway, which then saw it as a launching pad onto Carlisle and the West Coast Main Line south from there. And it became a double-track main line that served a very important purpose until 1923, when it became part of the London and North Eastern Railway, which concentrated on its main line from London to Edinburgh down the east coast. So the Waverley route found itself out on a limb to some extent. And then when Beeching came round in the early 60s, it was seen as a duplicating main line because there already existed a line from Edinburgh to Carlisle via Beatock and Carstairs. So the Beeching report spelt the end for the Waverley route mistakenly because it didn't take enough account of the population that lived along the railway in the Central Borders.
A campaign led by Hawick citizen Madge Elliott and supported by local politician David Steele failed to overturn the decision. And in 1969, the final passenger train travelled along the line. On board was David Steele.
It was very strange because there was a lot of publicity at Hawick where a mock coffin addressed to the Minister of Transport was put onto the guards van. And then the press all disappeared. They thought, that's it, it's over. And in fact, the real drama was at Newcastleton. And the people of the village were standing across the level crossing where the gates closed for the train. And I'd gone to bed. I was in my sleeper. And it must have been the local station master, I suppose, came along the track with a lamp shouting for my name, and I heard this, what they're wanting me for. And he said, people are not letting the train through, would you come and speak to them? So I had to get dressed and come and speak from the footbridge, and I thanked them for it was a bitterly cold night, it was January, freezing cold, and I thanked them for the demonstration and suggested that we should now perhaps leave, and they said, no, we're staying there, and whereupon the parish minister, Bryden Maiden, was arrested. And that, of course, really set the cat among the pigeons. There was no way they were going to move. So eventually, I negotiated with the people in standing on the crossing that if I went to the police station and got the minister out with no charges, would they then go? And that was agreed. So we went to the police station, got him out, and no charges were made against him.
As the years went on, there was growing support for a new campaign to restore the Waverley line back to Carlisle. The campaign for Borders Rail have been at the forefront for this to happen for many years and will not be satisfied until this has been totally achieved. The fruits of their work finally saw a breakthrough in the early part of this century as things began to happen David Parker.
A government working party of the time looked at the Scottish borders and recognised that our road links were poor, we had no rail links at all, and for us to have a much stronger and better economy in years to come, we needed to do something, and the railway was very much the answer. Government then gave us significant support and help to do a major feasibility study to determine how best to go forward, and actually after looking at a number of options, including a road building option, the Borders Railway as we know it was born, and that was really the reason why the Borders Railway today is being delivered.
In 2003, the Waverley Railway Bill was lodged with the Scottish Parliament. It was given royal assent 3 years later, and in 2008 the Waverley Railway project became known as the Borders Railway. Advance works began in 2010, but the real work started in 2013. Despite the infrastructure being largely in place from the existing Waverley line, vegetation had to be removed. The utmost care was taken to protect environments which were sensitive to the impact of construction work, and any protected species living on the railway corridor had to be moved and relocated under special licences. The start of earthworks showed everybody that the Borders Railway really was beginning to happen, and between Heriot and Falla Hill in particular, along the route of the A7 road, people could see the great transformation in front of their eyes. And for the next 2 years, they would witness some big changes in the landscape as roads were redirected, rock was quarried, and new bridges were built. The largest of these was at the Harden Green roundabout in Midlothian. Despite all this activity, there were many who still wouldn't believe that the railway would happen. A turning point was when track laying began in October 2014, a huge moment for the railway project. You've just seen the way most railway track is laid these days, but occasionally a more expensive but very efficient way of doing it is employed, called concrete slab track, and the one place on the route where it was used was in the Beauchamp Tunnel. Embankments and retaining walls had to be built, drainage had to be created, pumps needed to be installed and pipes laid. There are 137 bridges the length of the route, of which 42 were newly constructed and 95 needed refurbishment. Bridges had to meet current safety standards and some new roads were put in place. 7 new stations were built along the route, including 3 in the Borders at Stow, Galashiels and the terminus at Tweedbank. All this cost a lot of money, £294 million at 2012 prices, and the construction part of the operation came in on time and on budget. One of the most iconic structures on the Borders Railway is the Lothian Bridge Viaduct, just a short distance from the brand new Harden Green Bridge. It was built a long time ago, and it's credit to those builders that it was in remarkably good condition, as Network Rail spokesman Craig Bowman explained.
Yeah, there was some old ballast and kind of earth that had built up over the years, but once we stripped that back, what we found was a pretty immaculate bridge. There's very little work that has to be done to it. You can see some of the guys working on the bridge at the moment doing some pointing and some masonry work, but otherwise this is a structure in great condition. It's not far off being able to run trains on it once again.
10 new drivers were employed specifically to drive trains on the new railway line. Over 2,200 applied, and one of the lucky ones was Stuart from Selkirk, a mechanic with no previous railway experience.
I think all the trainees, to be honest, they've no railway experience. Some of them have had family in the past that have been in the railway, but certainly on my side there's not been anybody in the railway that I know of.
Did you believe that 2,000 plus would be applying and you'd be one of the 10?
I knew there would be a lot of people that applied for it because it was well publicised, but I never thought anywhere near the 2,000 mark. So to be one of the 10 out of 2,000 is a good achievement.
The entire project has come together in a remarkably short time, but it's not been without its critics. Some have called it a waste of money, a white elephant, and a Galashiels railway rather than a Borders railway. Many people from Borders towns such as Jedburgh and Kelso find it hard to get excited about it, and future-proofing has been a massive issue. David Spaven once again.
I do have a concern that in the last couple of years Transport Scotland have taken a rather short-sighted view of the way they should deliver the railway. Originally they were planning 15.5 miles of double track out of the 30.5 miles of the Borders Railway from New Craighall to Tweedbank. Now they've pulled that back to 9.5 miles. They're building new road bridges over the railway that will only allow single track rail width. So rebuilding these in the future to double track will be extremely expensive. So I do have some concerns about the way the railway is being delivered.
It's always the case if you try to expand the capacity of a railway. We're looking at it in different parts of the country just now, then it's going to cost money, there's no doubt about that. But what we've done with the Borders project is estimated as best we can what we think the likely patronage will be, what the usage will be, what the capacity is and what budget we have. You have to work within those constraints. But yes, of course, if you want to expand any rail line, then you're going to have to pay to do that. And sometimes, not talking about the Borders just now, but other ones you can see you've got to raise a bridge. Sometimes you have to do that for electrification purposes as well. So yes, you have to take those things into account if you want to expand the line.
The Borders Railway and how it performs will be scrutinised closely by everybody. The excitement has already begun. With the first train arriving at Galashiels station, there was an immediate buzz. The first test train created enormous interest as it came through the new route. The first passenger train followed soon after, when driver training commenced, and when these images were shown from inside the train driver's cab, interest reached fever pitch. The new transport interchange has now opened, offering an outstanding facility linking Galashiels with the other towns in the Borders. With journeys of under an hour taking people to and from Edinburgh and the Scottish Borders, steam excursions and the huge potential for bringing investment into the area, the Borders Railway is expected to be a big hit. Former First Minister Alex Salmond believes it will be.
It's going to be absolutely terrific, and the greatest thing of all is, you know, if you take like the West Highland line, Malay, fantastic, what an experience that is. But you're a day to get there, a day to do that, well worth it, and a day to come back again for you in Central Scotland. People can get this in an hour. In half a day they can experience the full delights of the Borders. I think this is irresistible. It's going to be one of the greatest tourist lines in the continent of Europe.
We have some track in store to take us halfway down 9-stone rig cutting. The bridge that was donated, we've started restoration work, removing some of the many years of rust and grime, and it will be erected at some point and should make a superb high-angle vantage point for any future photographers taking rolling stock coming up and down the line. The bridge needs quite a lot of restoration work to bring it back up to a safe standard, but we have started and the bridge will be put back into use at some point. We have a stockpile of signalling columns, the old semaphore arms that were been donated from both Stirling and Blaine, and they will be brought back into use.
I'm extremely interested in how print and digital information can be used together to complement each other rather than just dividing the world into two. You just have a printed book or you have a digital app. So there are various components as part of this guide. One of them is a souvenir map, which is a paper product that hopefully people will enjoy putting in their walls and just enjoying it visually. There are two printed booklets. One is on the history of the Borders Railway, and then there is also a printed guide to the station areas, and they will have maps for each area pointing out various visitor information and things and practical notes, and we're hoping that that will be a practical thing that people can take when they're out and about, because if anybody's tried to use a map on a smartphone on a sunny day, it's quite a challenge. So to actually have a printed product that you can see and rely on without having to charge your phone. So the advantages of actually having the app is that we can have up-to-date information and you can keep updating that. You can also have different kinds of media, including video, for example. So we have in the history guide, it's illustrated by stories of people who've lived and worked on the line. Particularly with the modern stories, we're able to actually put video conversations. It was fascinating learning about the navvies. I got quite obsessed about the history of the navvies, looking at the conditions they lived in. So we have something in the region of 40 huts along a stretch between Fushy Bridge and Tyne Head, with about 20 people living in them. And the people living in these huts were not only men, there were women and children as well. There's lots of things that people can do, and I have to say, in preparing this guide, I've had a lot of contact with people at grassroots, a lot of contact with community groups, community councils, individuals, and everybody at that level, at the community level, is very excited about the railway, and there's a lot of imaginative work and innovative ideas going on at the moment, and you just hope that the powers that be will give these ventures the support that they need.
I think this is an appropriate point at which to recognise the efforts of the project team and the contractors who've been incredibly professional and efficient in delivering what is a massive project. And we should also thank, I think at this point, the politicians who've supported the project and who've had the courage to make the investment. In any campaign, it's the nature of campaigning that you don't necessarily get everything you want. There are aspects of the railway that we think could be improved, but the important thing is that the railway is here, and we think it's going to be very well used and very successful, and that will help us as a campaign as we continue to lobby for further investment in capacity, reliability, even better journey times, and of course extension of the railway south of Tweedbank to Hawick and Carlisle. You know, this all goes back to 2000 and the original government feasibility study that was done then, and you know, incredible as it seems now, that completely overlooked the role of tourism for a railway from Edinburgh to the borders. You know, they saw it really purely as a commuter line, and that I think framed the thinking and resulted in a railway design that offered little else. The campaign's always felt that whilst commuter traffic is of course vitally important, tourism also has a role to play in helping to make the line more viable, and of course in helping to maximise the economic benefits of the railway by bringing tourist spend into the borders. You know, the government and the authorities have really now embraced the idea that there's a major tourism element to this line, and they're promoting it very strongly, and that's very pleasing indeed for the campaign. You know, the overall package for tourists will be a lot better than it would have been had we not made those representations. The campaign isn't over. We need to see how the new railway beds in, and we need to start seeing the benefits that we expect coming from that. And then we need to continue to lobby for further investment, and we also want to push forward the campaign to see the line extended to Hawick and then on to Carlisle.
This is a really special moment. You know, the term historic is overused, but this really is a historic moment. You know, the opening of the Borders Railway, the first passengers taking journeys, is going to be a really, probably quite emotional moment, as well as a real signal of a development that has the potential over the next few years to regenerate the borders completely. So I think it is hugely exciting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing it in operation.
Now, your predecessor in his role as First Minister, when we spoke to him, he was hugely excited about it, very passionate about the railway. Did that come across to you in conversations that you know, you could tell how much it meant to him and how excited and interested he was in rail development?
Absolutely. You know, he was a huge enthusiast for this project, and you know, there's many people who have worked for a long time to make this happen, but there's no doubt Alec is one of those people. Perhaps without the dedication he had to it, it wouldn't have got to where it has today. He gave me not that much advice when he left office and I took over, but he gave me a few pieces of advice, and certainly to do whatever I could to make sure not just that the project was completed. By that time the project was well on the way to completion, but he gave me the advice of making sure that we do everything we can to ensure that it fulfils its potential for the borders. It's not just a railway, although it's very important as a railway, the longest piece of domestic railway delivered in over 100 years. But we've got to make sure that it delivers the real economic, social, cultural, tourist potential for the borders that it has the ability to do.
Now, you've been up and down the rail line, or been visiting towns up and down the rail line over the last 12 months or so. Have you actually had the chance to travel on any stage, on any part of the rail line so far?
I'm looking forward to doing that for the first time next week, and I'm really looking forward to that. But it's been, as I travel around Scotland, up and down the length and breadth of Scotland all the time, and you know, it's been really quite incredible to watch the whole thing take shape. So I'm very excited about stepping on the train and taking my first journey next week.
A lot of column inches was written in the early days in particular about the rail line being used for commuters, for people travelling down to the borders to work, and obviously vice versa. In more recent times there's been a real focus as well on the tourism side of things. Now there is huge potential there, presumably going forward, for this to be beneficial for so many tourist attractions in the area to link up on the back of and benefit from.
Well, this is where I think it's got massive potential, and probably this is the bit where we have to really work hard to make sure that we realise that potential. And it goes back to what I said earlier on about the advice Alex Salmond gave me when I took over from him as First Minister, is to make sure that we don't just open the railway, important though that is, and then forget that we've got to make sure that it really does deliver the benefits for the borders that everybody knows it's capable of doing. That's why he put such an emphasis on looking at the tourist potential, looking possibly at a new location for the Great Tapestry of Scotland, the potential for steam train tourist trips on the line. All of that is really important, and I think the opportunities of all of that are in many ways limitless for the borders, and that's what I mean when I say this is a hugely exciting rail project. But what it might mean in the years ahead for the borders, we should not allow ourselves to be limited in our imagination about what that might deliver. It will take hard work, but it's definitely there to be done.
Well, everyone, the great day has finally arrived, and you are truly the lucky ones to be the first on the first train out of Galashiels since 1969. Today, on this joyful occasion, a wrong has been righted, and we celebrate the reopening of the Borders Railway.
Finally got here after all the training and hard work that we've had to put in, but it's worth it. It's definitely worth it to be driving it will be the first train for the golden ticket users. After 40 years, it's just a massive sense of pride. It's been a pleasure to be part of the series, and let's hope everybody in the Borders uses this line.
Well, I've just been shaking hands with the driver because I shook hands with the driver on the last train out of Gala. And I always hoped, but was never sure, that I'd ever shake hands with a train driver again coming out of Galashiels station. And this is it, and it's a fantastic day. I have to say that the closure of the line was the biggest single disappointment in my 50 years in Parliament. It should never have happened, and I hope that this is just the beginning of what will be an expanded line down through the Borders.
3 years ago, on the 31st of August, my dad got dealt
the worst news possible, that he had cancer, and 3 years later was sitting on the train.
Looking out the window here, and I can remember coming up here in the steam trains and seeing all the same scenery, and I never thought I'd ever see this again.
It was actually my son Billy who got the ticket. I'm just joining him on it. I nominated Billy because he lost his dad to cancer this year, and his dad, when he was battling cancer, had said, wouldn't it be great if Billy could be one of the first people to go on the train? So I made his wish come true today.
All my friends at uni couldn't believe it when we didn't have a train, and I was hopping on the X95 home or driving, and I think it's just going to be so beneficial for people like me, people that are connected to Edinburgh, but it was really difficult to get up here.
Yeah, as expected, I mean, trying to fight back the tears a wee bit. We've been waiting a long time for this, but it's great to see it, and great to see such a mixed bunch of people on the train, young and old, people from all over, and particularly the fact it's coming all the way from Tweedbank, so yeah, super.
As a sort of tangible piece of memory I have with me today, and I've been showing it to various people on the train. I've got a little montage of tickets which I kept from those days, tickets to places like Belsays and Hassendine and Stobbs and Hoyk and so on, as well as some of the stations we've been through today. So I have that as a memory still, and it's a little frame thing I have in the house. It's a fact, it's one of the biggest lines, as we know, to open. This is the biggest line indeed to open since Victorian times, and it was one of the biggest mistakes. It took into account some aspects but not enough aspects, and the kind of spirit which people have in them to actually get this railway line back, and I'm sure to frequent it, shows that in fact it was a mistake, and hopefully it will be a great success. I'm sure it will be. And Dr. Beeching, well, I'm afraid that's another one you've lost.
the fields of green and brown, yeah, I am the train, I am the train. I'm flying over Fala Hill and down into the valley. You'll see me coming and I won't dilly-dally. From the city streets and darkened alleys, I am the train, I am the train. I am the train, been gone since '69, but now you'll see me coming down the line. And I can bet you I'm gonna be on time, yeah, I am the train, I am the train. Fountain Hall and Fala Hill, Newton Grange and Brunstein, New Craig Hall, Shaw Fair and Edinburgh's dark lanes. Through the fog, the snow and the cold rain, I am the train, I am the train. I am the train, I'll pick you up at Tweedbank, I'll take you through Galashiels and Beaushank. I'll stop at Stow, Gore Bridge and Estbank. I am the train, I am the train, I am the train. I'll get you at the station, I'll take you to your chosen destination. I'll bring you back again for work or recreation. I am the train, I am the train. I'll get you at the station, I'll take you to your chosen destination. I'll bring you back again for work or recreation. I am the train, I am the train, I am the train. I'll get you at the station, I'll take you to your chosen destination. I'll bring you back again for work or recreation. I am the
Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a long time, 46 years in coming, but today I am delighted that the persistence of so many is being rewarded. This new Borders railway line is the result of £300 million of investment and the expert work of more than 1,000 people.
First Minister, ladies and gentlemen, the Duke of Edinburgh and I are delighted to be back in the Borders today, and especially to have arrived by train. It has been wonderful to witness the excitement which the return of the railway has brought here. The Borders Railway brings so much promise for sharing and invigorating this most beautiful countryside as a place to work, live and enjoy. Prince Philip and I are very grateful for the warmth of your welcome on this occasion. Many, including you, First Minister, have also kindly noted another significance attaching to today, although it is not one to which I have ever aspired. Inevitably, a long life can pass by many milestones. My own is no exception. But I thank you all, and the many others at home and overseas, for your touching messages of great kindness. So now, to the business in hand, it is my very happy duty to declare the Borders Railway open.
I've been in the Borders over 30 years. This is the best day the Borders have ever had. It's so important for us to have this railway back. Fantastic day. And I thought the Queen and the First Minister spoke beautifully. Delighted it's happened so well.
It's absolutely tremendous. This is a day that will be unique and will go down in history forever, really. It's a fantastic, amazing day to have the Queen here on this very special day, here in the Scottish Borders, opening our very special railway is just tremendous.
Oh, it's so exciting, isn't it? And the kids just loving it. I was just having a chat with them. Everyone is so genuinely excited by what this means for the region. And you couldn't ask for more publicity than having the Queen come here on the day she becomes the longest serving monarch. Fantastic.
The eyes of not just Scotland, not just Britain, but the world on Scotland and the Scottish Borders today.
Absolutely, and there's so much that we know. If the world gets a glimpse of the Borders and gets to see what we have on offer, that train line wouldn't be big enough. And in fact, the demand to get it on further will just grow. So an exciting day, and I'm so glad to be a part of it.
This takes the cream, obviously. Worked on steam a long time, a lot of charters. I have worked the Royal Train before with steam, but this one was just that little bit extra special. And I think what made it special really was the Queen's Day, you know, the longest serving monarch in history, and that made it just a little bit special for everybody.
You'll have travelled up and down many of the country's rail lines. Yes. How does this newly reopened Borders line compare?
It's a difficult line. It's a really difficult line for the steam engine. The long gradient, especially what made it worse this morning, having to stand at Yoke Grange, and then from a standing start in the middle of the bank, which is, you know, normally you'd come by New Craig Hall and you'd get a bit of a run at the bank, but unfortunately we couldn't do that today. But hopefully tomorrow, we'll be back tomorrow and we'll get a run at the bank. But yeah, but it's a difficult line, it really is. The gradient's difficult to come up with a steam engine, but we dug in and we got there, so that was the main thing.
The exhibition has always been in this coach, and the coach had to be completely taken apart almost and rebuilt to house the original exhibition. I took over the exhibition a couple of years ago, and this year we're doing a very particularly North British attitude to the whole thing, and we have the idea of how the railway was built, and then the running of the railway, developing into British Rail, and then the closure of the line in 1969, and then at the end we're looking towards the future, what we intend doing with the area here. Now the heritage side of this, of Whitram, is very, very important, and we hope to in the near future develop the navvy side, because this was a very important area. Just behind the coach here was where all the navvies stayed, and Mr. Ritson, who was in charge of the contract, that's where he stayed, and all the workshops were here. So in the future we want to rebuild the navvy hut and try and give our visitors a navvy experience. Whether that means a jug of beer and a spade and a shovel, we'll see. We'll see how it works out. And at the moment we've introduced some electrics into the system where we have interactive things that people can turn wee knobs and things and change lights and so on. And we've also got the shop and the buffet, which has been extensively redone, so that we've got quite a good system here. That I shall be changing the navvies, and then at the other end we'll be putting a thing to do with the various railway signs on the trackside signs that will be developed for next year at the other end of the platform. This is my favourite. It belongs to Matt, who was one of the original people who formed the Waverley Route Heritage Association. But this lamp from Fountain Hall Station, to me, is a thing that I would want to save in case of an emergency of any kind. This is, to me, is the most important thing to me.
All we'd planned was a little heritage centre, 2 coaches and some picnic benches and so on. And the next thing, of course, somebody said, would you like some track? And lo and behold, 1.5 miles of track were donated while they were doing the track renewals on the Settle line at the time. Well, you can't say no. But we had to pay for the transport, which was quite substantial. There was 24 wagon loads of track came in 1 week. which was amazing. So it was like a truck depot. Everything was stacked up 6 high. We just grew like topsy. You start laying track, and then the next thing is, well, how about the platform? How about this? How about a car park? And so on. So you just keep going until you reach the stage we're at, which is something like 11 years down the road from a standing start with nothing on site.
We're always looking out for volunteers. The more we could get, the more we could run activities in the centre, and the more work we could do on the locomotives behind us, the coaches, and everything would move forward. Anybody that can paint, do general things, we could use them. It's not skilled people that we were looking for. Yeah.
You sometimes have to sit down and just look around and think, what was it like even 5 years ago? It was nothing like it is today. Yeah. So looking backwards is very therapeutic, because you can get very tired and so on, but it's really good to see the progress we've made.
A lot of thought went into it, but new processes, working closely with the Dutch on they're actually the LRU machine, long rail unit, how the actual rails came off, how many we could deliver at a time, how many trains were required, what was our recovery plan if anything did go wrong. Most other jobs were seen as a nuisance, making noise, being a bit of a harassment to the travelling public. This job, completely different. Every single day there was someone somewhere with a camera, a video camera. Some of the lineside neighbours were actually offering us cups of tea and coffee, which was unique. I've never ever heard that anywhere else before on the railway. I had to learn new loading manuals for the safe delivery of the rails to site. The guys on the deck working with the machine, they had to learn all how it worked before we even started. We had a couple of trial runs to make sure everyone was happy, and we weren't requiring any additional training. Everything went well. We're working through a Scottish winter. There's only 2 days we actually got soaked through, but other than that, the weather was kind to us. The high point was getting to here. Just an emotional burst just when we got to here. It was a huge big cheer went up. It was a remarkable achievement. If I had a magic wand, I would go with stage 2, yes. I would love to push on. Unfortunately, that's out with my pay band.